Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to talk about drive shafts. Like a lot of my videos, this is something that a lot of you guys ask me about, and you're wondering, when you should upgrade your drive shaft, how much power or torque they can hold, and a lot of you are even more curious about my car because now I've got two B58s making over 600 horsepower, and so you're wondering, am I concerned about my drive shaft? How am I making it last so long? And what you should do in case you're concerned about your drive shaft failing. So we're going to talk about all those details in this video, and I'm going to share my perspective on the drive shaft issue that people have been dealing with for several years now. And hopefully this either puts your mind at ease or at least gives you some guidance on what you should do to upgrade your drive shaft. So let's go ahead and talk about it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So I know a lot of you guys hate when I have these drawn out intros, but we are going to start at the basics just because everybody doesn't know exactly what we're dealing with here. So the drive shaft is underneath your car, and it basically takes all the power coming out of your engine and transmission and sends that power to your differential. So there's one going to your rear diff, and if you have an X-Drive car, you also have one going to your front diff. Now, the main one most people are concerned about is the one that goes to your rear diff because that's the one that tends to fail. And there are a couple different components built into that system. Of course, starting out, everything comes out of your transmission. Then you have a guibo that's basically like a hard bushing that mounts your drive shaft to your transmission. Then you have the front half of your drive shaft that's connected by a flange. In the middle, you have a center support bearing that kind of holds it up and helps reduce the vibrations that you experience in the car. You have a U-joint that connects to the rear half of your drive shaft. So the stock drive shaft is two-piece connected by that U-joint in the middle. And then at the rear, it connects directly to your differential. So there is a sliding on nut that basically screws it on and clamps it directly onto your diff. Now, there are a lot of different setups depending on the actual chassis that your car has. So if you're really trying to get the details on how your drive shaft works, it's best to get under your car and look at all of those details. Even if the flanges look the exact same, the dimensions and stuff might be a little bit different. So that's something that you can pretty easily jack your car up, lower your exhaust, and kind of see what the makeup is of your drive shaft. But at least for most of the cars out there, especially if you have like a 340i, 440i, what most B58 owners own, that is basically how your drive shaft is built up. Now let's talk about the failures because everybody's really concerned when they see cars talking about they broke a drive shaft, not just because, of course, it's a pretty expensive part to replace, but that's something that will definitely leave you stranded. If you can't send power to your differential, you can't move the car. And so it is something kind of scary to deal with, but what I want to remind you guys is it's not just about power. Yes, my cars make over 600 horsepower, but I don't drag race my cars. I don't launch my cars. I don't drive on a really sticky tire. I don't drive at a drag strip. I pretty much don't put my car in any of those high stress scenarios where people typically break a drive shaft. And that's really what it comes down to. So I tell people, regardless of the power that you're making, if you're planning on running like a really sticky drag radial or like a tire specific for drag racing, or if you plan on launching on a really sticky prepped surface, whether that's on the street or on the track, those are the scenarios where your drive shaft is at the biggest risk. Because when you're launching your car, it's not just about power, it's about the torque. So if you're building boost and getting a really good strong hit to drop your 60 foot, all of that is going to go through your entire drivetrain. And the weakest link is what's going to slip first. So sometimes it's your tires, sometimes it's your clutch or your transmission. But for most of us, it ends up being the drive shaft. At some point, the drive shaft is going to twist and break because that's the weakest point in the system. Now, it is really unfortunate because a lot of older like E-Series BMWs don't seem to have this issue. So I don't know if the drive shafts have gotten weaker over time, but it seems to be a much more blown up or noticeable issue on B58 BMWs. Now, in my case, this is what I attribute my success with my stock drive shaft being that I use 200 tread wear tires at most. And like I said, I don't launch my car, I don't drag race, so I really don't have to worry about putting it in those high stress scenarios. But I have even heard of people getting like a really good anti-lag hit and twisting their drive shaft on the street. So again, it's less about how much power and torque your car is making overall and more about how you're using it. If there's a really big torque spike and your car grips up and hooks, I know a lot of us are concerned about wheel spin and, dropping our 60 foot and all this stuff and getting a really good launch. But all of that puts more stress on your drive shaft and makes it more likely to fail. So just keep that in mind. In my case, if I'm spinning on a launch or if I'm spinning even at 40 miles an hour in a low gear hit, that doesn't bother me because I'd much rather roast my tires a little bit than twist my drive shaft and again be left stranded. I could upgrade it. I probably will at some point, but it's not really high on my priority list because of my setup and how I drive my car. Now, there are a couple different things that fail, but the main thing is the drive shaft itself. So usually towards the rear, you'll see the drive shaft is completely twisted. And when you look at it, you can see that the drive shaft is hollow. So it's basically a thin, hollow tube. And when it twists, it basically just breaks. So that's the most common failure that I see, where people basically have the drive shaft just dragging on the ground because it twisted and left half of the drive shaft hanging while the other half is still mounted up to your differential. But there are some other things that can fail as well. That guibo, that rubber bushing, can definitely fail. It is not that soft, but as you're launching and beating on your car, it does wear out over time and it can be damaged and cause issues. Also, the center support bearing can also have issues as, again, you drive your car hard, it can wear out and cause it to fail and kind of knock around your drive shaft. So in most cases, you're going to experience like a lot of vibrations in the car. It's going to feel really harsh. You'll hear a lot more drivetrain noise, and that can kind of help indicate that those, dampening features that are built into your drivetrain are no longer working or they're failing and wearing out. So there are a lot of different upgrades that you can make. Of course, one big one is just upgrading your existing drive shaft, so replacing it with a stronger two-piece version. So what you'll usually do is go to a shop that either makes two-piece drive shafts, or you can get one custom made, but it'll look just like the stock unit, just a lot thicker and beefier. So it'll be able to handle more torque. They also make one-piece drive shafts, so that eliminates the center support bearing and the U-joint. So that way you just have one long, strong drive shaft without any extra components to worry about. These usually also come with solid guibos on both ends. So again, you're not going to have to worry about any of those dampening things. But of course, keep in mind when you do that, it does transmit more noise, a little bit more vibration and stuff inside of the cabin, especially as your car gets higher in speed. There are some things that you can try to do to improve that, while balancing your drive shaft will definitely help. It doesn't always completely eliminate the issue, and it can be kind of hard to find a really good quality drive shaft that drives just like stock. Drive shafts also come in a couple different materials. Of course, you can go with steel, kind of tried and true, strong metal material, but a lot of people like to upgrade to carbon fiber drive shafts because those can be strong and also a little bit lighter. And anything inside of your drivetrain that you make lighter definitely helps create more power. So the same as, running lighter wheels, lighter tires, and things like that. This will reduce your drivetrain losses so that more of that brake horsepower makes it to your wheels so that you can accelerate quicker. So those do get a lot more expensive, but obviously with a lot of benefits. There are a couple different companies that make upgraded drive shafts. One popular one is Driveshaft Pro. They are sold by Bimmer Network, so I will have my affiliate link down in the video description, but it's a pretty popular company. They make an upgraded two-piece drive shaft. All you need to do is make sure that you provide your vehicle details so that they can get all the lengths and the flanges and everything correct, and they can build you a drive shaft for your needs. Another popular company is Driveshaft Shopped. They also make one-piece drive shafts, so you'll see them on a lot of cars. Vargas also makes a one-piece carbon fiber drive shaft for the A90 and various BMWs, so definitely reach out to them if you're interested in going that route. And another popular one a lot of people don't talk about is there are typically local shops that can just custom make you a drive shaft. So if you're able to make the measurements, they can make them off of your measurements, or even better, if you can take it off of your car and drop it off with them, then they can use that to build you a new one or modify your stock one to make it stronger. The only downside is if yours is already twisted and broken, then Obviously, you can't do that, but if you're preemptive about it, you know you're going to be driving your car hard, drag racing a lot, launching with a lot of torque. Take the drive shaft, bring it to a local shop, and they should be able to build it up for you. Just talk to the local guys around you, maybe people with trucks and stuff, and they should be able to give you guidance on a recommended shop to use. Now, one other thing to consider that I hadn't really thought about until I started seeing videos about this is where your drive shaft fails towards the rear of the car is right next to your fuel tank. And so not only is your drive shaft failing going to be expensive and annoying to deal with getting your car towed home, but it can absolutely be a safety risk. If your drive shaft breaks and hits your fuel tank, it can puncture your fuel tank and cause it to fail. And that's actually something that I haven't personally experienced, but the previous owner on my 340i did experience that and replaced the drive shaft at some point in time. Now, I've posted a video a couple years ago where I had to replace my fuel tank because the fuel level sensor wasn't reading accurately. And when I cut it open, I found that it had completely popped off of its mount and was basically just laying inside of the fuel tank. But over time, it finally clicked for me that when he broke his drive shaft, it probably hit the fuel tank and knocked it off of its mount. And that's why the fuel level readings weren't good in my car. So thankfully, it didn't, crack the fuel tank and leak fuel and potentially burn down on him. But that is a very real issue that you could deal with. So the only shop that I know of right now that makes a safety loop is Titan Motorsports. And basically what this does is it kind of wraps around the drive shaft. So if it does fail, even with an upgraded one, it'll hit the casing inside of that safety loop and avoid hitting your fuel tank. So it'll at least keep it all contained and avoid a safety risk that could cause a fire. So definitely something else to consider, again, especially for you guys that are drag racing. Some regulatory bodies for racing actually require it for certain races. So that's something else if you want to make sure that your car can pass tech and, get through without any problems. It's something that you'll want to add for a little bit of insurance. But hopefully this kind of covers all of the questions that you guys have about upgraded drive shafts. Again, I might upgrade in the future. I'm not really anticipating I'll need it, but maybe it's something we can do a DIY on. Let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in. But for now, I think that's it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.